John was not your typical dad. He wasn't just raising his daughter, he was raising himself along with her, learning every day what it meant to balance love, responsibility, and life's unexpected twists. After his wife passed away several years ago, John found himself in a world that felt both overwhelming and lonely. The house was quieter than it used to be, and the laughter that once filled the rooms was now replaced by the small giggles and occasional tantrums of his little daughter, Lily. Despite the pain of loss, John had made a promise to himself that he would give Lily the childhood she deserved, full of warmth, love, and security. Every morning, John woke up early, often before the sun had even peeked over the horizon. He would quietly tiptoe into the kitchen, trying not to wake Lily, and prepare breakfast for both of them. Pancakes were her favorite, and he had perfected the art of flipping them just right, golden on the outside, soft in the middle. As he cooked, he thought about the day ahead. Between his job at the delivery company and taking care of Lily, there seemed to be little time for anything else. Yet John didn't mind. He felt a sense of pride in managing everything himself, in being both mother and father, protector and provider. After breakfast, John helped Lily get ready for school. He tied her shoes, brushed her hair into neat little braids, and packed her favorite lunch. Even the smallest things mattered to him. He wanted Lily to feel cared for, to know that even though their family was smaller now, love still filled every corner of their lives. He dropped her off at school with a big smile and a warm hug, whispering, "Have a great day, sweetheart. I'll see you soon," and he watched her skip away, her little backpack bouncing with each step, feeling both pride and a pang of worry. Work was never easy. John had chosen a job that allowed him to support his daughter and still be home in the evenings, but it was physically demanding and required long hours. Often, he would come home tired, his muscles aching and his mind running 1,000 miles an hour. Yet, every time he saw Lily running to him with her arms wide open, laughing, his exhaustion melted away. There was something about being needed, about being the one she relied on, that gave him energy he didn't know he had. He wasn't just a worker, he was a dad, a hero in her eyes, and that role meant everything to him. Life as a single dad wasn't just about routine, it was also about learning to handle the unexpected. Sometimes, bills piled up faster than he could pay them. Other times, Lily got sick, and he had to leave work early, juggling appointments and responsibilities. He had to become an expert in multitasking, problem solving, and most importantly, patience. There were moments of frustration, of feeling overwhelmed, but he never let those moments last. He learned to take a deep breath, to smile even when tired, and to remind himself that every challenge was shaping him into a stronger father and a better man. John also made time for small joys. He loved reading bedtime stories to Lily, inventing silly voices for each character, making her giggle until her cheeks hurt. They baked cookies together on weekends, sometimes making a mess that left flour on every surface, but laughter filling the kitchen. He taught her to ride her bicycle, holding on to the seat until she felt confident enough to pedal on her own. Each of these moments was precious, and John treasured them, knowing they would become the memories that Lily would carry with her forever. Even with all the responsibilities, John never lost his sense of kindness toward others. He believed in helping people, even strangers, whenever he could. It was something he hoped to teach Lily, not just to take care of herself, but to care for others as well. That belief guided many of his small daily actions, from holding the door open for someone at the grocery store to helping a neighbor carry groceries. To him, these gestures were simple, yet they added meaning and warmth to life. At night, when the house grew quiet and Lily was asleep, John often sat by the window, reflecting on the day. He thought about the challenges he had overcome and the little victories that made it all worthwhile. He thought about the future, wondering what it would bring for him and his daughter, and he made silent promises to keep striving to be the best father he could be. Even though life was far from perfect, John felt a deep sense of purpose and contentment. He knew that every struggle, every sleepless night, and every act of love mattered. John's life as a single dad was a delicate balance of responsibility, love, patience, and hope. It wasn't easy, but it was real, full of lessons, laughter, and small victories that made every day meaningful. He didn't just survive, he thrived, showing his daughter the true meaning of courage, kindness, and resilience. The rain had started falling steadily by mid-afternoon, drumming softly against the roof of John's old sedan as he drove home from work. The streets glistened with wet reflections of streetlights, and puddles formed in the low spots of the asphalt. John didn't mind the rain, it was calming in its own way, but today, his mind was preoccupied with the usual thoughts of bills, groceries, and making sure Lily's homework was done on time. He had learned long ago that life rarely paused for anyone, rain included. As he turned onto a quieter side street, something unusual caught his eye. A woman was standing beside her car on the shoulder, looking flustered and anxious. The vehicle's tire was completely flat, and her frantic gesture suggested she had been trying to fix it herself, to no avail. John slowed down instinctively, his hands gripping the steering wheel tighter. In moments like these, helping someone wasn't a choice, it felt like a responsibility, almost instinctual. He pulled over carefully, keeping a safe distance from the woman and her car. She looked up, surprised, a mix of relief and embarrassment crossing her face. John stepped out into the rain, letting the droplets soak his jacket. "Need some help?" he called, his voice steady but friendly. The woman hesitated for a moment, then nodded, her grip tightening on the umbrella she held like a lifeline. Her name was Emily, and she explained that she had been rushing to an appointment when she heard a loud pop and felt her car wobble dangerously. She had tried to change the tire herself, but the jack wouldn't cooperate, and she had no experience dealing with car troubles. John smiled reassuringly, trying to ease her anxiety. "Don't worry," he said. "We'll get this fixed in no time." He rolled up his sleeves and got to work, checking the spare tire, loosening the lug nuts, and jacking up the car with practiced precision. Despite the pouring rain, John moved calmly and efficiently, his hands steady and confident. Emily watched, a mix of fascination and gratitude on her face. She hadn't expected anyone to stop, let alone someone willing to do the work for her. While working, John struck up a casual conversation. He asked her about her day, her work, and whether she lived nearby. Emily hesitated at first, clearly embarrassed about being in such a helpless position, but gradually, she started talking. Her laugh was nervous but genuine, and John found himself relaxing despite the rain soaking through his jacket. The conversation turned to light-hearted topics, favorite movies, childhood memories, and small life frustrations, and for a few minutes, the tension of the situation seemed to vanish. Finally, after what felt like both a short and long time, the flat tire was replaced. John wiped his hands on a rag he carried in his pocket and stepped back, smiling. "There you go. You're all set," he said. Emily's relief was palpable, she couldn't stop thanking him. She offered money, but John shook his head. "No need," he said. "Just drive safely." Emily hesitated, glancing at him with an expression that seemed to weigh both gratitude and curiosity. "You're really kind," she said softly. John shrugged modestly, feeling a little embarrassed by the praise. "I just do what I can," he replied. "Everyone needs a little help sometimes." Before getting back into her car, Emily smiled warmly. "I won't forget this," she said. And just like that, she drove off, leaving John standing in the rain, a quiet satisfaction settling in his chest. It was a small moment, a brief interaction in the grand scheme of life, but for John, it was one of those moments that reminded him why he believed in helping others. As he got back into his car and continued home, he didn't know it yet, but this simple act of kindness would set the stage for a twist neither of them could have imagined. Little did John know, the woman he had just helped would cross his path again in the most unexpected place and in a role that could dramatically affect his life. For now, though, he thought only of Lily and the warm, cozy home that awaited him, unaware that fate had a strange sense of timing and irony. But sometimes, life rewards kindness in ways we could never predict, and today's rainy afternoon was just the beginning of such a story. Once John had rolled up his sleeves and knelt beside the car, he noticed just how tense Emily had been. Her hands were trembling slightly, her eyes darting nervously between the flat tire and the tools scattered on the wet asphalt. It wasn't just the tire that had her anxious, it was clear she was frustrated, overwhelmed, and embarrassed all at once. John understood that feeling. Life had a way of throwing unexpected challenges at everyone, and sometimes, pride made it harder to ask for help. "Don't worry about a thing," John said as he inspected the tire, his tone calm and reassuring. "I've handled plenty of flat tires. You're in good hands." Emily gave a small nod, but her shoulders remained stiff, as if she was bracing herself for disaster. John couldn't help but smile. She reminded him of his own daughter sometimes, small moments of fear masked by determination, courage hidden behind hesitation. He set to work methodically, loosening the lug nuts with a steady hand, careful not to rush, even though the rain continued to pour down. Water dripped from the brim of his jacket hood, soaking his hair and running into the collar, but he barely noticed. His focus was entirely on getting the job done efficiently and safely. Each movement was precise, the way a mechanic would handle a car, but with an extra layer of care that came from being someone who truly wanted to help. As he worked, John started talking to Emily, not just to pass the time but to ease her nerves. "So, how long have you lived around here?" he asked casually. She hesitated, then answered, her voice soft but steady. They spoke about small things at first, her neighborhood, the unpredictable weather, and the little annoyances of daily life. Emily's nervous energy began to fade slightly, replaced by a sense of comfort in the presence of someone willing to help without judgment. There was something almost magical about the rhythm of the task, loosening the nuts, lifting the car with the jack, sliding the spare tire into place. The sound of the rain hitting the car roof, the smell of wet asphalt, the occasional splash from passing cars, all of it became background to a moment that was simple yet profound. John wasn't just fixing a tire, he was giving someone peace of mind, showing patience, and providing calm in the chaos. Emily finally relaxed enough to ask a question, almost shyly. "Do you do this often? Stop for strangers?" John chuckled, wiping his hands on a rag. "Whenever I can," he replied. "Sometimes people just need a little help. It doesn't take much to make a difference." Emily's eyes softened. There was honesty in his words, a genuine warmth that was rare to find in the rush of everyday life. By now, the tire was ready to go on. John carefully lifted it into place, tightened the nuts just enough, and lowered the car back to the ground. Every step was deliberate, thoughtful, as if he knew how much this small act could matter in the moment. Emily watched him with a mixture of awe and gratitude. She had expected someone to stop, perhaps offer moral support, but not to take the time, energy, and effort to actually solve the problem. When he finished, John stood back and let her inspect the work. "All set," he said, brushing the dirt from his hands. Emily leaned down to check, her expression slowly turning from doubt to relief. "It's perfect," she said softly. I don't know how to thank you." John smiled, shrugging modestly. "Just be safe. That's thanks enough." For a moment, they both stood in silence, listening to the rain, the occasional honk of a distant car, and the faint hum of city life around them. It was one of those rare, quiet moments where time seemed to pause. Emily's eyes met his, and there was a recognition, not just of the help he had given, but of the kindness behind it, the human connection that often went unnoticed in everyday life. Finally, she offered him a tentative smile. "I won't forget this," she said, getting back into her car. John nodded, waving as she drove away, unaware that their paths were destined to cross again in a way neither of them could have predicted. The rain continued, but it no longer felt inconvenient. It felt like the kind of weather that cleansed the soul, setting the stage for life's mysterious twists. John climbed back into his car, tired but content. There was a quiet satisfaction in helping someone without expecting anything in return. It reminded him of why he worked so hard, why he cared so deeply, and why even small acts of kindness could have meaning far beyond a single moment. He had helped a stranger today, and in doing so, he had reminded himself of the goodness in the world, and perhaps, unknowingly, planted the seeds for something extraordinary to come. The moment the tire was secure, the rain had started to ease, leaving the air crisp and fresh. With droplets clinging to leaves and car rooftops, Emily stood beside her car, shifting from foot to foot as if unsure how to end the encounter. She glanced at John, who was brushing his hands on the rag, dripping water from his jacket, and something in her expression softened, a mixture of relief, admiration, and quiet gratitude. "Thank you so much," she said again, her voice more genuine than before, as if the words were finally catching up to her feelings. John smiled, giving a modest shrug. "It's no problem. Really. Just make sure you drive safely and get home without any trouble," he said, keeping his tone casual, though inwardly, he felt the satisfaction that came from knowing he had made a difference in someone's day. Emily's fingers fiddled with her keys, and she hesitated, perhaps wanting to offer something more than just words, perhaps wanting to say how much it meant that someone would stop and take the time to help. She opened her mouth, closed it, then finally said, I wish I could repay you somehow." Her eyes met his, searching, hoping for guidance, and John shook his head gently. "Just promise me you'll pay it forward someday." "That's all I ask," he replied, and in that simple request, there was no judgment, no expectation, just a reminder that kindness could ripple in ways unseen. There was a quiet pause. Emily smiled faintly, a mix of warmth and melancholy in her gaze. "I think I can do that," she said softly, and for a brief moment, it felt as if the rain had left a gentle calm over the world, the city noises distant, the day pausing just long enough for two strangers to connect over something human, something rare. She climbed into her car, fumbling slightly with the seatbelt, then looked back again. "I won't forget this," she said, her voice carrying a weight that suggested more than just gratitude. John nodded, watching as she started the engine and carefully pulled back onto the wet street. The tires hissed over the slick pavement, and she disappeared around the corner, leaving John alone on the side of the road. He stayed there for a moment, letting the quiet settle in. The rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle, and the world seemed washed clean, not just of water but of the small anxieties that had filled the afternoon. There was a strange satisfaction in that, a reminder that even the smallest gestures could hold meaning, that kindness had its own quiet reward, unseen but felt. As he climbed back into his car and started the engine, John reflected on the brief encounter. He didn't know her life, her worries, or what she might be going through, and yet, in those few moments, he had been able to make a difference. He thought about Lily and how he tried to teach her the same values, patience, empathy, and the courage to help when no one is watching. Helping someone with a flat tire might seem small, but it was a moment where humanity mattered more than anything else. Driving home, John couldn't shake a small feeling of curiosity. Who was this woman really? What kind of life had led her to that roadside, struggling in the rain? He didn't dwell too long on it. After all, the road home was calling, and Lily would be waiting, but there was a faint sense that this encounter might not be as fleeting as it seemed. When he pulled into his driveway, the familiar sight of his little house and the laughter of Lily playing in the backyard greeted him, and all the exhaustion from work and the rain melted away. He carried the memory of Emily with him, but in the way that people carry moments of connection, a quiet reminder that the world still had surprises, that not every act of kindness went unnoticed. As he helped Lily with her homework and prepared dinner, John thought about how life had a strange way of rewarding, or testing, those who acted with good intentions. He didn't yet know that fate had already begun weaving a connection between him and the woman on the roadside, a connection that would bring him face to face with the consequences and surprises of human kindness in ways he couldn't yet imagine. For now, though, the memory of the goodbye lingered like a soft note in a song, gentle, fleeting, and full of promise. John went to bed that night feeling a sense of quiet contentment. He had helped someone in need, and in doing so, had been reminded of why he believed in doing the right thing, even when no one was watching. Little did he know, that simple farewell would soon return to him in a way that would change everything. The next morning, John woke up to the sound of his alarm, the usual hum of the heater, and the soft breathing of Lily, still half asleep in her bed. Life felt normal, work, school, and the usual responsibilities awaited him. But sometimes, life had a way of turning ordinary days into something extraordinary, often when you least expected it. John couldn't have imagined that the very person he had helped in the rain the day before would resurface in a way that would shake his world completely. He arrived at the courthouse feeling a mix of nerves and resignation. Today, he had to appear in court over an unexpected dispute regarding an accident he had been tangentially involved in. It was minor, but the formalities and the thought of facing a judge always brought a knot of tension to his stomach. He went through security, took a seat in the waiting area, and tried to focus on breathing slowly, reminding himself that he had done nothing wrong, yet the uncertainty gnawed at him. When the courtroom doors opened and the judge entered, John froze, not literally, but his mind seized. Behind the bench sat a woman whose face seemed eerily familiar. It took a moment for him to place it, to remember the short, soaked interaction from yesterday's rain-soaked afternoon. It was Emily, the same woman whose car he had helped with the flat tire. The same woman who had smiled at him, grateful, and driven off, leaving him standing in the rain, completely unaware that she held authority over the very decision that now loomed over him. John's heart pounded. He had helped her as a stranger, she didn't owe him anything. And yet, here she was, presiding over a situation that could dramatically affect his life. He felt a swirl of emotions, anxiety, anticipation, and a strange sense of inevitability, as if fate had carefully timed this meeting to test him in ways he couldn't predict. Emily's gaze swept the courtroom, and when her eyes locked briefly with John's, there was a flicker of recognition. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips, and he could sense a flash of the memory they had shared in the rain. The proceedings began. John listened carefully as the charges and claims were presented, feeling the weight of the room's tension pressing against him. He remained calm outwardly, though internally, his mind raced, replaying every moment of the previous day. He remembered the soaked asphalt, the smell of rain, the sound of water dripping from the hood of his jacket. The memory was comforting, oddly grounding, amidst the uncertainty of what was about to unfold. Emily presided with professionalism, her voice steady, impartial, yet there was an unspoken awareness in her eyes. She had a duty to be fair, to uphold the law without bias. But she also remembered the small act of kindness, the generosity, and calm empathy John had shown. In that split second, she realized that judgment wasn't always black and white. Sometimes, character, integrity, and heart deserved consideration. When it came time to deliberate, John's mind wandered briefly to Lily, imagining her tiny face full of trust and expectation. He thought about how life's smallest acts often returned in unexpected ways. Emily reviewed the evidence, listened carefully to the arguments, and then delivered her decision with the measured authority of a judge but with a subtle, almost invisible nod to the man who had shown her kindness when it mattered most. The ruling was fair, balanced, and considerate, acknowledging responsibility but mitigating the harsher consequences in a way that reflected both law and humanity. John exhaled deeply when it was over, the tension in his shoulders melting slowly. Relief, gratitude, and a quiet sense of awe washed over him. Life had brought them together in this unusual way, linking two strangers across fate's unpredictable threads. The encounter reminded him that no act of kindness was ever wasted, and that sometimes, the universe returned generosity in ways beyond imagination. As he left the courtroom, John caught Emily's eyes one last time. There was mutual understanding there, silent acknowledgement of a bond formed in the briefest but most meaningful moment. Neither spoke, but the connection lingered, unspoken yet profound. He stepped out into the fresh air, rain-soaked streets now glistening under the morning sun, and for the first time in days, he felt a deep sense of peace. Life had a way of testing people, but it also had a way of rewarding integrity, honesty, and compassion. The twist of fate, as unexpected as it had been, reinforced something John had always believed, that kindness mattered, not for recognition, but because it could shape outcomes in ways we might never fully see. The courtroom was silent, the air thick with anticipation. Every person present seemed to sense the weight of the moment, though none could know the connection that had silently threaded itself between the judge and the man standing before her. John stood upright, shoulders squared, trying to appear calm, but inside, a storm of anxiety churned. His heart still raced from the shock of recognizing Emily, the woman he had helped just a day ago, now perched in the seat of authority, wielding power over his fate. Emily, behind the bench, felt a flicker of recognition that she could not dismiss. Her mind flashed back to yesterday, the rain, the flat tire, the way John had worked with patience and care, refusing payment, offering only kindness. She had been impressed then, but now she had to separate personal feelings from duty. She was a judge, trained to be impartial, to weigh evidence and apply the law fairly. And yet, she could not ignore the impression John had left. He was more than a name on a court docket, he was a man who had shown integrity when no one was watching, a man who had acted selflessly. As the proceedings moved forward, Emily listened intently. The details of the case were routine, but every piece of testimony, every question, every objection carried weight. John answered respectfully, speaking clearly and honestly. His calm demeanor, the quiet dignity in his tone, and the way he acknowledged responsibility were appropriate reminded her of the man she had met yesterday. There was no arrogance, no pleading, no theatrics, just honesty. That honesty mattered, perhaps more than any argument in the room. Emily took a deep breath before delivering her decision. Her voice, steady and commanding, filled the courtroom, but there was a subtle warmth to it, a quiet acknowledgement of character that went beyond the facts of the case. She explained her reasoning with precision, citing the law and the mitigating circumstances, and then, in her ruling, she offered a sense of mercy tempered by fairness. It was a judgment that reflected justice, yes, but also humanity. John felt the tension in his chest slowly release as he listened. Relief, gratitude, and a touch of astonishment mingled within him. He understood immediately, the woman he had helped, the stranger he had stopped for in the rain, had seen his actions not as a transaction or a momentary favor but as a glimpse into his character. That small act of kindness had spoken volumes, and it had made a difference now, in this moment, in this courtroom. The courtroom murmured quietly as the ruling was recorded. John nodded respectfully, unable to fully articulate the mix of emotions swirling inside him. Emily watched him carefully, her expression calm but thoughtful. She had fulfilled her role as a judge, but she also felt an unspoken connection to the man who had reminded her, in a fleeting moment, of the importance of empathy and compassion. As the session ended, John stepped forward briefly, meeting her gaze across the room. He wanted to thank her, but he also knew that words were unnecessary. In her eyes, he saw understanding, acknowledgement, and a subtle appreciation for the life lesson they had both shared, one that went far beyond legal proceedings. It was a reminder that integrity, kindness, and character mattered in ways that often reached far beyond immediate perception. Outside the courtroom, the day felt unusually bright, as if the world itself had paused to let this story unfold. John walked slowly to his car, letting the moment sink in. The relief was overwhelming, yes, but deeper than that was a quiet recognition of how interconnected lives could be, how small gestures could echo in ways we could never predict. He had only intended to help a stranger, to do the right thing in a small, ordinary moment. And yet, that moment had returned to him in a profoundly meaningful way. Emily remained behind the bench for a few moments longer, collecting her notes, reflecting on the unusual twist of fate. She understood now that judgment was not only about laws and evidence, it was also about perspective, about seeing the person in front of you, about acknowledging the goodness that sometimes shines through ordinary actions. That brief encounter in the rain had offered her a perspective that no legal textbook could ever teach. As John drove away, he glanced briefly at the courthouse, a faint smile tugging at his lips. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew this: kindness mattered, integrity mattered, and sometimes, life had a way of rewarding the heart in ways far more powerful than money, recognition, or status. For John, this was a lesson lived, not just taught, and it was one he would carry with him forever. John walked out of the courthouse with a sense of relief that felt almost surreal. The morning's tension had melted away, replaced by a quiet calm that settled deep in his chest. Every step he took on the stone steps outside felt lighter than the one before, as if the world itself had acknowledged the turn of events. He couldn't stop thinking about Emily, the woman who had been both a stranger and, unexpectedly, a pivotal figure in this moment of his life. Her eyes, calm yet perceptive, had reflected something he hadn't realized until now, that even in fleeting moments, the truth of a person's character could shine through, and sometimes, life rewarded those truths in mysterious ways. Driving home, John replayed the events of the past 2 days in his mind. He remembered the rain, the flat tire, the small talk that had blossomed amidst frustration, and the way Emily had smiled at him as she drove away. He thought about the courtroom, her composed authority, and the subtle ways her awareness of him had shaped her judgment. It was a strange, almost magical coincidence, and yet it felt like fate had carefully orchestrated it all. He marveled at how life had a way of testing people and rewarding them for quiet, sincere acts of goodness. When he arrived home, Lily ran toward him, her small arms wrapping around his legs, pulling him into a tight embrace. "Daddy," she exclaimed, her voice full of excitement and warmth. In that instant, the weight of the past few days seemed to vanish. For John, there was nothing more important than the little girl who depended on him. Her laughter, her energy, her trust in him, it was a reminder that the life he was building, no matter how challenging, was filled with meaning. After dinner, as Lily played quietly in the living room, John sat in his favorite chair by the window, reflecting on the lessons of the past 48 hours. He realized that kindness, integrity, and empathy were not just abstract virtues, they were practical, tangible actions that could shape outcomes in unexpected ways. The small choice to stop and help a stranger had rippled far beyond that rainy street, influencing events in ways he could never have imagined. It was a humbling reminder that every action, no matter how ordinary, carried weight. John also considered Emily, and he felt a surge of gratitude toward her. She had fulfilled her role as a judge with professionalism and fairness, yet she had also recognized the humanity in him. It was a lesson for him as well, that while life sometimes put people in positions of power, it was how they wielded that power, with empathy, with awareness, that truly mattered. He hoped that she, too, would carry the memory of their brief encounter as a reminder of the impact of small, sincere acts. The days that followed were calmer. John returned to his routines, but everything felt subtly brighter, more meaningful. He approached work, parenting, and even casual encounters with neighbors and strangers with a renewed sense of purpose. He realized that life's unpredictability was not something to fear but something to embrace. Every choice mattered, every gesture could echo, and every moment held the potential to shape the lives of others in ways unseen. One evening, as John tucked Lily into bed, she looked up at him with wide eyes. "Daddy, do you think helping people is really that important?" she asked softly. John smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "It is, sweetheart," he said gently. Sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness can change someone's whole day, or even their life. Lily's eyes sparkled as she nodded, absorbing the lesson in her own quiet way. For John, teaching her these lessons was as important as living them himself. Later that night, John sat by the window, watching the stars glimmer faintly in the sky. The city was quiet, and for the first time in days, he felt fully at peace. He knew that life would continue to challenge him, that responsibilities and obstacles were never-ending. But he also knew that he had within him the ability to meet those challenges with compassion, courage, and integrity. And in that knowledge, he found strength. The story of the flat tire, the rain, and the unexpected courtroom twist became more than just a remarkable coincidence, it became a life lesson, one that John carried in his heart and hoped to pass on to Lily. It was proof that good deeds mattered, that character had value, and that even in a world filled with uncertainty, humanity and kindness could guide the way. And with that thought, John finally allowed himself to rest, knowing that life, with all its unpredictability, had a way of rewarding those who acted with an open heart. As the days passed after the courtroom ordeal, John found himself thinking more and more about the strange sequence of events that had unfolded in such a short span of time. The rainy afternoon when he had stopped to help a stranger, the brief conversation with Emily, the quiet satisfaction of making someone's day a little easier, all of it had seemed ordinary in the moment. Yet, life had a way of showing him that even the smallest actions could resonate far beyond what he could see. John realized that he had often underestimated the power of everyday kindness. It wasn't just about helping with a flat tire or holding a door open for someone, it was about recognizing that every person, no matter how much or how little they seemed to matter in the grand scheme, carried their own challenges, fears, and moments of vulnerability. By offering help without expectation, he had not only eased Emily's day but had also unknowingly shaped the outcome of a situation that could have dramatically impacted his own life. It was a lesson in the quiet, unseen influence of compassion. He also reflected on Emily, the judge who had presided over his case. Her decision had been fair, but it had been shaped subtly by the recognition of his character, by the understanding that he was a man of integrity. John understood now that human judgment was not just about rules, laws, or procedure, it was also about perception, empathy, and the ability to see the person behind the circumstances. The realization filled him with gratitude, not only for the outcome but for the reminder that the world was filled with people capable of fairness, compassion, and understanding. As a father, John felt an even deeper connection to the lessons he had learned. He wanted Lily to grow up understanding that actions mattered, that integrity, honesty, and kindness were more than words, they were choices, and the choices she made could ripple far beyond what she imagined. He remembered the countless small moments with her, helping her tie her shoes, reading bedtime stories with silly voices, listening patiently to her endless questions. Each of those moments had shaped their bond, just as yesterday's small act of helping a stranger had shaped his own life in unexpected ways. John began to notice things differently in his everyday life. He smiled at neighbors more often, offered help when he saw someone struggling, and paid attention to moments where a kind word or gesture could make a difference. He realized that kindness was not transactional, it was a mindset, a lens through which to see the world. And when those moments of empathy were genuine, they had the power to connect people in ways that could change lives. He also thought about the unpredictability of life, the way fate seemed to weave together moments and people, often in ways that seemed coincidental but were, in hindsight, perfectly timed. The rain, the flat tire, the courthouse, Emily, it all formed a pattern that reminded him that life was rarely random. Small actions mattered, connections mattered, and moments of courage and compassion could have consequences far beyond imagination. One evening, after tucking Lily into bed and watching her drift off to sleep with a soft smile on her face, John sat quietly by the window. The city lights twinkled faintly in the distance, and the gentle hum of life continued around him. He thought about the strange beauty of human life, the way people intersect, the ways choices ripple outward, and the quiet, often invisible ways that good deeds come back to those who act with integrity. He realized that this story, this experience, was more than just a lesson, it was a confirmation of the values he wanted to live by and pass on to his daughter. John understood now that the story of the flat tire, the rain, and the unexpected courtroom twist was not just about him or Emily. It was about the human capacity for empathy, the courage to act kindly even when unnoticed, and the power of small gestures to create lasting impact. He had been reminded that life could be harsh and unpredictable, yes, but it could also be rewarding, surprising, and profoundly just in ways no one could foresee. As he finally leaned back in his chair, John felt a deep sense of contentment. He knew that his journey as a father, as a human being, and as someone who chose kindness was far from over. Life would continue to test him, challenge him, and surprise him, but he had learned something essential, that every act of goodness mattered, that integrity and compassion had value beyond measure, and that sometimes, the universe found ways to repay those who acted with a true heart. And with that understanding, John allowed himself to rest, carrying a quiet hope and determination to continue living a life defined not by fortune or recognition, but by the simple, profound power of kindness.